We've seen NBA players hit with ridiculous fines for a variety of reasons, but these NBA players managed to get themselves banned from the league. Before Chris Anderson, or better known as the Birdman, would go on to become a local treasure with the Miami Heat fans during the LeBron era, he had been falling on hard times with substance abuse while with the Hornets during the 2004-2005 season. A season later in 2006, his troubles threatened to jeopardize his future in the NBA when he tested positive for drugs with the NBA. While it was never released what drugs Anderson had been doing, we do know they were hard drugs considering NBA rules. Anderson received a permanent ban from the league, and he was denied an option to appeal for reinstatement for at least 2 years. Had he tested positive for either marijuana or steroids, the league would have initially started out with fines. However, league rules state that coming out positive once for drugs considered in the category of abuse constitutes a ban. The drugs on that list are LSD, meth, heroin, codeine, morphine, and PCP. The Hornets were faced with no other option but to have released Anderson until he made good on his reinstatement. That was if he did. The owner of the Hornets, George Shin, released a statement following his forced departure from the league saying, "We're obviously disappointed and saddened to hear Chris has been dismissed from the league. On behalf of his teammates, coaches, and the entire organization, we wish him well and hope he learns from this experience." Anderson began to use the time to get clean for good while he worked in his game to prepare for reinstatement in the league in 2008. To accomplish this, Anderson attended a rehab center in Malibu, California for a few months before going off to train with fellow NBA players to help him get back his game. 2 years later in 2008, Anderson had done just that. Despite sporting a few more tattoos on his neck and arms, Anderson had finally been clean. He was even able to join up with the Hornets while they were in the mid-swing of the 2008-2009 season. Hornets GM Jeff Bauer said the team had been long anticipating his return, saying, "We're always more concerned with Chris Anderson the person rather than Chris Anderson the player. We're pleased that he's taken the appropriate measures to get himself reinstated by the NBA. We'll now begin the process of getting him back on the court and back in a Hornets uniform as quickly as possible." Before he would change his name to be known as Metta World Peace, he ironically was not a very peaceful person from when we called him Ron Artest. One of the biggest highlights of his career didn't take place in the form of a game-winning shot or even something infamous like a scandal. Ron is known for inciting the biggest NBA brawl in the history of the sport. During the final 45 seconds of a matchup between the Pacers and the Pistons, Rasheed Wallace goes up for a shot, and he gets fouled hard by Artest. Wallace is noticeably aggravated by the foul, and he shoves Artest. A typical team versus team huddle follows the shove to keep both players from launching off punches. The teams eventually calm down, and when they're waiting for a ref call, Artest can be seen on the scorer's table, and he has a drink thrown at him from the crowd. Artest jumps from his position, now running up to the fan he thinks through the drink. He just started throwing punches. All pieces broken once again, and now other Piston fans start to move in on the fight, which only leads to Pacer players to come up to the rows to fight the fans back. The site's so chaotic that even the commentators seem to be having a hard time describing what exactly was taking place. At some point, a fan even gets in the court and starts another fight, now nearby the Pistons bench. As the players are finally being escorted out, Piston fans start throwing drinks, food, really anything they could get their hands on at the Pacers players and staff. We'd come to find out later that Artest's first punch to the fan that started the whole incident wasn't even the same fan that had thrown the drink. He mistaken the fan for someone else. John Green, who was the man who launched the Diet Coke, starting the whole incident, later admitted, "I was sitting there talking to my buddy, and I asked, does anyone have a Diet Coke with ice in it? I bet I could hit him with this cup. I just launched it in the air underhanded, went up like a perfect dart, hit him right in the chest." Now it was time for the NBA to send out his punishment. Artest was suspended for the rest of the 2004-2005 regular season and any playoff games, which ultimately amounted to 86 games missed. Fellow Pacer Steven Jackson, along with Jermaine O'Neal, was suspended indefinitely. All players involved had to undergo community service. As for the fan, some were charged and banned from the Pistons Stadium for life. In terms of injuries, 9 fans were hit and 2 had injuries bad enough they had to go to the hospital. Starting out his career in 1967, Roger Brown signed with the Indiana Pacers, which at the time had been a part of the ABA. With the ABA, Brown went on to become one of the greatest players to ever play in the league prior to the ABA-NBA merger that took place in 1976. During his days as a Pacer, Brown had gone on to score a career total of 10,498 points, which averaged out to 17 points per game, along with winning 3 ABA championships. However, something had happened to Brown before success with the ABA that cost him his chance to ever play in the NBA even after the merger. After a successful high school career, Brown went on to get accepted with a full scholarship to play at the University of Dayton. His freshman season, Brown continued to dominate as he had in high school. However, disaster struck shortly after Brown befriended Jack Molinas. Molinas had been at one time a Colombian All-American NBA player, but he'd been banned from the NBA for illegally betting on games. And despite Brown never being caught betting on games, his close relationship with Molinas had been enough to raise suspicion. And it'd later be found out that Brown had been working loosely enough with Molinas to justify banning any chance Brown would have in the NBA, along with ripping up his scholarship with the University of Dayton. Brown left the college and went through a period of despair while he lived in New York, working dead-end jobs. He'd eventually clean his act and return to Dayton, Ohio to work the night shift at a General Motors plant. His luck had come back around in 1967 when the ABA had just formed. The ABA and general manager of the Pacers discovered Brown when they acted on a tip that Oscar Robinson had informed them about Brown's playing ability. Now at 25 years old, Brown started his basketball career with the rival ABA in 1967. He'd go on to continue playing until the NBA merger, where he decided to leave the league out of loyalty for the ABA because of his second chance they'd given him. Despite having been banned from the league in the early 60s, 80s, Brown's retired jersey can still be found hanging in the Pacers Stadium to commemorate the 3 championships he led the team to in the early 70s in the ABA. OJ Mayo's habits of breaking league rules had started just before he got drafted in the NBA in 2008. During his freshman year playing ball at the University of Southern California, Mayo had proven to be an excellent player. His abilities on the court attracted the attention of sports agencies who had already started scouting Mayo for representation for his eventual draft in the NBA. One of those agencies had been Billy Duffy Associate Sports Management. While playing in college, it was discovered that Mayo had been accepting gifts from the agency, which in the eyes of the NCAA was a gross overstep of league policy. The controversy forced Mayo to end his college days after just a year of playing. That same year in 2008, Mayo was drafted to the Memphis Grizzlies as the 3rd pick in the draft. Mayo would go on to lead a fairly dramaless career in the NBA as he went on to be an asset for the teams he played for until 2016. And during the 2016 preseason, it had been found that Mayo had been violating the league's anti-drug policy when he tested positive for using painkillers. He'd been the first player to receive a ban in over a decade since Chris Anderson's ban for the same offense in 2006. Similar to Anderson, Mayo received a permanent ban that restricted Mayo from ever reinstating into the league for at least 2 years. After receiving the ban, Mayo decided to go public with the issues that ultimately led to his behavior. While in the league, Mayo dealt with his father's sentence to prison for 10 years for the distribution of drugs. His younger brother passed away in juvenile jail, while another close friend had been killed. The stress that he faced off the court created the perfect situation for him to start using drugs, so he did. Mayo talked about spending time away from basketball for the first time in his life, saying, "Taking the game away was probably the closest thing to jail I'll get to. Since I was like 6 or 7, I've always had a basketball season. That was the lowest point in my entire life. The shell shock of not being in the NBA, all my peers are playing and I'm not because of my boneheaded mistakes. Take the ball away? What is there to do? I didn't get a phone call last summer from anyone besides my family for 40 days. People who called me every day didn't call me for 2 or 3 months. I still haven't talked to some people who I talk to every week. Everybody was off. I was tripping. Well, I see how the world is now. That was rock bottom." And despite him being ruled eligible for reinstatement in 2018, Mayo never returned to the NBA, and he's since played international ball in Puerto Rico, Taiwan, and even China. Sherman White became better known for his illegal activities surrounding college ball than he ever did as a player. White had been a model all-star throughout his day playing college ball at Long Island University. Averaging over 27 points per game, it was said White was almost certainly going to be drafted as the #1 pick for the 1951 NBA draft. Despite being on a basketball scholarship at LIU, White struggled financially to help his family, who lived in the neighborhood borough of Brooklyn. Midway through his junior year at school, White began to notice that several of his teammates had been appearing off in their games from time to time. White began connecting the dots together in a matchup against North Carolina State, where he noticed one teammate began to obviously throw a bad pass to him. During his senior season, not only had White become fully aware of the point-shaving scandal many of his fellow teammates had been a part of, he began to join them. White talked about starting out saying, "After that NC State game, Eddie Garb befriends me. We sat down and started talking. He brought in Big O's and Furtado. He gave me the same old story. We control the game. We're good enough to beat these guys anyway, and we can make some money. They ain't giving you no money here at LIU. Same old story. We can control the game and nobody will get hurt except the gamblers. Now I'm one of the guys." Peer pressure. And the entire operation had been orchestrated through Eddie Garb, who'd been working with Salvatore Sollazzo. Salvatore had been a 45-year-old jeweler and gambler who during the 1930s had spent 5 years in prison. Since his days in the pen, Salvatore became notorious for his point-shaving scandals he schemed throughout New York City schools. And it wouldn't be long until people started to notice. As soon as they did, a police investigation ensued that eventually led to White being faced with serious criminal charges. Sadly, a day before his imprisonment, White had been recognized as the Sporting News Player of the Year. Following his charges, White was sentenced to 12 months at Riker Island Prison, which had been notorious for hardened criminals, gangsters, and murderers. White talked about serving time at Rikers, saying, "To this day, I believe there was some kind of collaboration between my lawyer and the prosecutor. Rikers Island was supposed to have been built for rehabilitation, but it was the worst place in the world for a kid to try and straighten out his life. I often wonder why I never came out of there a criminal. With all the characters and perverts I met, certainly would have been the easy way to go." Following his release, the NBA had banned him. Only after he found out, the Knicks prepared to place a territorial pick on him. Electing to forego the remainder of the 3 years he had left in college, Tyreke Evans declared for the 2009 NBA draft, and he was selected by the Kings in the 4th pick of the first round. Starting off his first season with the Kings, Tyreke was able to comfortably solidify his place in the Kings as one of their premier scorers, as he averaged 20 points per game during his rookie season. Even after being traded to the Pelicans, back to the Kings, and eventually the Memphis Grizzlies, Tyreke's game continued to be remarkably consistent. That would be until his latest trade to the Indiana Pacers during the 2018-2019 season, which also happened to be the season he was permanently banned from the league for violating the league's drug policy. To be banned after just a single offense meant that whatever Tyreke had come positive for had to have been harder than marijuana. As similar to the cases prior to him, he forfeited the ability to be reinstated into the league for at least 2 years. When news had become widespread of his release from the NBA, the Pacers released a statement saying, "The Indiana Pacers were informed Friday by the NBA that Tyreke Evans has been dismissed from the league for a violation of the league's anti-drug policy. We take these matters seriously and we'll reach out to Tyreke to offer our support." Even during this hiatus, Tyreke won't qualify to have a chance to be reinstated into the league until the 2021 season. Hey yo, dog. I'm gonna need you to click on this video on the screen, bro, or I'm gonna have to ban you from the channel, okay? Look, I don't wanna have to do it. I don't wanna be that guy, you know what I'm saying? But it's just, it is what it is. You either click on this video on the screen or you're banned. Chicka-pow, chicka-pow. That's the ban sound. Click on it.